Hey guys, my name is Vishal and I welcome you all to this session by Edureka. In today's session, we would be discussing an important AWS concept, that is Amazon S3, which is Simple Storage Service. Before we move further with this session, let us take a look at the offerings or the agenda of today's session first. This is the agenda or the offerings of today's session. We would start by understanding what are AWS Storage Services. Then we would take a look at the main topic of discussion, that is Amazon S3. In that, we would be also focusing on core concepts like buckets and objects, versioning and cross-region replication, storage classes. Then we would discuss transfer acceleration. I would also give you a use case. And while we go through this session, I would be parallelly giving you demo on required topics. So this could be a long video, guys. So I believe you all have come with some patience for today's session. Having said that, guys, let us just quickly get started. So what are the different AWS storage services? Now, when you talk about storage services, there are quite a few storage services. Let us quickly take a look at those one by one. So Amazon Elastic Block Storage is one of those storage services. What it does is it basically gives you storage in the form of blocks. Each of this block is connected to a particular system or an instance. So in order to access this memory or this storage, you have to make sure that you have an instance connected to it and you can access it through that instance only. So that is one limitation of Elastic Block Storage. Otherwise, it is highly scalable. You can kind of detach, attach volumes to your instances at your will, and it is a very good storage service. Having said that, the other storage service is Amazon Elastic File System or Amazon EFS. Now, this again works on a similar mechanism that Amazon EBS works on, but the difference is it is a shareable or shared file system. Hence, it is not attached to a particular system or an operating system. Then you have Amazon S3 Glacier, which again is a storage system or a service which basically lets you store archival data. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, there is certain data that you would not want to retrieve or use on daily basis or on frequent basis. In that case, you can actually go ahead and put your data in a service like Glacier, because what it does is it basically locks in your data for a certain while during which you cannot access it. Once you've cleared that duration, you are free to access this data. But the other issue is it takes or gives you high amount of latency. That means you cannot access this data in real time or right away. It takes a while to retrieve this data. So why should you store your data at a place or in a storage like Amazon S3 Glacier? Well, the benefit of this storage is it is very cheap, or it is more affordable when you compare it with S3. And the fact that it has high latency, that is the reason it is cheap. What kind of data can you store here? Say, for example, the data that you might not require every day. If you talk about Indian systems or Indian hospitals, we normally have our birth certificates that are delivered by hospitals to us once a baby takes birth. So what happens is once you get this so-called birth certificate, it is not every day that you're going to go to the hospital and request for a new birth certificate. But the hospital still has to maintain a copy of your birth certificate. That is, in case if you need to get this document, probably they can give it to you. So that is why this is some data which is important, but it is not needed every day. So that kind of data can be stored in Amazon S3 Glacier. I believe I've made my point. I've gone a little vague or out of the way to discuss this topic, but I hope we are on the same line. Having said that, guys, the other storage systems are AWS Storage Gateway, which basically forms a gateway between two different platforms. Say, for example, my data lies on my on-premise architecture, and I need to move it to Amazon Storage Services. So what I can do is I can have this storage gateway that lets me move my data from that environment to this environment. So in simple words, it acts as a middle layer or a gateway for storing data or for moving data. Then you have Amazon S3 storage. Before that, I would also like to mention a couple of other services which are not there on the screen. Say, for example, you have your Snowball, which actually lets you move your data physically. I mean, you would be having a device or a system in which you would kind of copy your data, move to the desired destination, and then paste it there. But this happens physically. In case if you want to move large amount of data, then you have other storage service by AWS called as Snowmobile, which is a moving data center which works on the similar principles. You copy your data from your existing environment into the data center. It is physically transferred to the main location, and from there you can move your data to the data center where you are planning to move it. And this might take 5 to 7 working days depending upon the location where you are planning to move the data, and a lot of other policies come into picture as well. So this was about the other storage services that AWS has to offer. There are a couple of other storage services that AWS still offers, and I haven't discussed those, but you are free to visit Amazon's official channel to know more about those. As far as today's topic is concerned, our main focus would be on S3 storage. So let us just move further and try to understand what the storage exactly is. So guys, when you talk about S3, now it is a simple storage service which is simple or easier to use in real sense. It lets you store and retrieve data which can be in any amount, which can be of any type, and you can move it from anywhere using the web or internet. So it is called as storage service of the internet. What are the features of this particular service? It is highly durable, guys. Now, why do I call it durable? It provides you durability of 99.999999, some 11.9. Now, when you talk about that amount of durability, it is understandable how durable this service is. What makes it this durable? It uses a method of checksum where it constantly uses checksums to analyze whether your data was corrupted at a particular point. And if yes, that is rectified right away. And that is why this service is so durable. Then it is highly flexible as well. As I've already mentioned, S3 is a very simple service, and the fact that you can store any kind of data, you can store it in any region or any available region is what I would mean by the sentence. It makes it highly flexible to store the data in this particular service. And the fact that you can use so many APIs, you can kind of secure this data in so many ways, and it is so affordable. It meets different kinds of needs, thus making it so flexible. Available. Is it available? Yes, definitely it is very much available. As we move into the demo part, I would be showing you which regions basically let you create these kind of storages and how can you move and store data in different regions as well. So if you talk about availability, yes, it is available in different regions, and the fact that it is so affordable, making it available becomes all the more easy. Cost efficient, yes. Now to start with, we normally do not get anything for free in life, but if you talk about S3 storage, AWS has a free tier which lets you use AWS services for free for 1 complete year. But this happens in certain limits. Now, when you talk about S3, you can store 5 GB of data for free, at least to get started or get used to the service. I believe that is more than enough. And what it also does is it lets you have somewhere around 20,000 get requests and somewhere around 2,000 put requests as well. So these are something that let you store and retrieve data. Apart from that, you can move in 15 GB of data every month outside of your S3 service as well. So if you're getting this much for free, it is definitely very much affordable. Also, it charges you on pay-as-you-go model. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, when I say pay-as-you-go model, what we do here is we pay only for the time duration that we use this service for, and only for the capacity that we use this service for. So that is why as you move along, if you need more services, you would be charged more. If you do not need more amount of the service, you won't be charged to that greater extent. So is it cost efficient? Definitely it is. Scalable? Yes. That is the best thing about AWS services. Most of them are scalable. I mean, you can store huge amount of data, you can process huge amount of data, you can acquire huge amount of data. If it is scalability that is your concern, you do not have to worry about it here, because even this service readily scales to the increasing data that you need to store. And the fact that it is pay-as-you-go model, you do not have to worry about the cost factor as well. Is it secure? Definitely it is. Now you can encrypt your data. You have various bucket policies as well that let you decide who gets to access your data, who gets to write data, who gets to read data. And when I said you can encrypt your data, you can actually go ahead and encrypt your data both on client side and on your server side as well. So is it secure? I believe that answers the question on its own. So guys, these were some of the features of Amazon S3. So guys, now let us try to understand how does S3 storage actually work. Now it works with the concept of objects and buckets. Now bucket, you can think of it as a container, whereas an object is a file that you store in your container. These can be thought of as AWS S3 resources. Now when I say an object, basically object is your data file. I've already mentioned that you can store any kind of data, whether it's your image, whether it's your files, docs, whatever it is. These are nothing but your data, and this data comes with metadata. When I say an object, it is combination of your data plus some metadata or information about that data. What kind of information? Basically, you have the key, that is the name of the file that you use, and version ID is something that tells you which version are you using. As we discuss versioning, probably I would talk about version ID a little more. But meanwhile, I believe this is more than enough. Your objects are nothing but your files with the required metadata. And the buckets, as I've already mentioned, these are nothing but containers that hold your data. So how does it work, guys? Well, what happens is basically you go ahead and create buckets in regions and you store your data in those regions. How do you decide what buckets to use, what regions to use, where to create the bucket and all those things? Well, it depends on quite a few factors. When I say I have to create a bucket, I need to decide what region would be more accessible to my customers or to my users, and how much cost does that region charge me, because depending upon the region, your cost might vary. So that is one factor that you need to consider. And latency as well. I mean, if you put your data in an S3 bucket that is far away from you, fetching it might cause high amount of latency as well. So once you consider these factors, you can create a bucket and you just store your objects. When I said version ID, key, actually your system automatically generates these features for you. So for you, it is very simple. Create a bucket, pick up your object, put it in it, or just go ahead and retrieve the data from the bucket whenever you want to. So I believe this gives you some picture about what S3 is. Now, let me quickly switch into the demo part and let me give you a quick idea or quick demo as to how S3 works so that it is not too much theory for you people. So guys, what I've done is I've actually gone ahead and I've switched into my Amazon Management Console. Now, as I've already mentioned, AWS gives you a free tier for which you can use AWS services for free for 1 complete year. Mine is not a free tier account, but yeah, if you are a starter, you can create a fresh account. You just have to go ahead and give in certain details. All you do is you just go to your web browser, search for AWS free tier and sign in with the required details. They would ask you for your credit card or your debit card details. Enter any one of those for the verification purpose. And you can actually go ahead and set up alarms as well, which would tell you as in, okay, this is the limit to which you have used the services. And that way you won't be charged for access of data usage or service usage. Having said that, guys, this is about creating an account. I believe it is fairly simple. You can create an account. Once you create an account, guys, this is the console that would be available to you. What you have to do is you have to go ahead and search for Amazon S3. If you search S3 here, it would kind of redirect you to that service page. So guys, as you can see, this is the company's account probably. Somebody uses it in the company and they have their buckets that are already created. Let's not get there. Let us just go ahead and create our own bucket and just go ahead and put in some data into it. It is fairly simple, guys. I've already mentioned it is very simple to use kind of service. All I have to do is click on create bucket and enter in name for some bucket. Guys, now this name is unique. It is globally unique. Once you enter a name for the bucket, you cannot use the same name for some other bucket. So make sure you put in valid name. And the fact that I use the term global, something reminded me to be explained of. So guys, as you can see, if I go back here, I want you to notice this part. So guys, when you are into the management console or you open any service, by default, the region is North Virginia. Okay, so if I create a resource, it would go to this region. But when I select the service that is S3, you can see that this region automatically goes to global. That means it is a global service. It does not mean that you cannot create bucket in particular regions. You can do that, but this service is global is what they're trying to say. So let us just go ahead and create the bucket. Let us call it today's demo. You cannot use caps, guys. You cannot use some symbols. So you have to follow the naming convention as well. Today's demo. Sorry, I'm very bad at naming conventions, guys. I hope it is okay. Let it be in US East. You can choose other regions as well, guys, but for now, let it be whatever it is. So I'm gonna stick to North Virginia. There are 76 buckets that are being used. Let us just say next. Bucket name already exists. So this was already taken, guys, see. So you cannot use it. Let's call it, say, Ramos bucket 13113. Okay, do you want to keep all the versions of the object? We will talk about what versions are. Okay, guys. Meanwhile, you just bear with me. I'm just going to go ahead and create a bucket. Create a bucket. And there you go, guys. I'm sure Ramos bucket should be here somewhere. Here it is. If I open it, I can just go ahead and create folders inside it, or I can directly upload data. So I say upload, select a file. Let's just randomly select this file. It is Van Rossum, founder of Python basically. Let's just say next, next, next. And the data is uploaded, guys. You can see the data being uploaded and my file is here for usage. So guys, this is how object and bucket kind of stuff works. You can see that this is the data that I have. If I click on it, I would get all the information. What is the key? What is the version value? For now, let's not discuss version, but this is the key or the name of the file that I've uploaded. So it is fairly clear, right guys? So let us just quickly switch back to the presentation and discuss some other stuff as well. Now guys, another important topic that is to be discussed here is S3 storage classes. Now we've discussed how the data is stored or how buckets and objects work. But apart from that, we need to discuss some other pointers as well. As in, how does AWS charge me or what kind of options do I have when it comes to storing this data? So it provides you with three options, guys: standard, infrequent, and glacier. Let me quickly give you an explanation to what do these storage classes mean and what all they offer to us. When I say standard, it is the standard storage which gives you low latency. So in case if there is some data that needs to be fetched right away, you can actually go ahead and use standard storage. Say for example, I wish to go to a hospital for certain kind of checkup. So in that case, my details would be entered in. And the fact that I'm getting myself checked in a hospital or diagnosed in the hospital, what happens is this data is important, and if it is needed right away, it should be available. So this kind of data can be stored in your standard storage where the latency is very less. The next we have infrequent access. Now what do I mean by that? Now in this case, my latency period has to be low because I'm talking about data that I would actually need anytime if I want to. But when I store this data for a little longer duration, all I want is this data to be retrieved quickly. Say for example, I get a particular report or a particular test done. So in that case, I would actually go ahead and submit my details or say for example, my blood samples, but I need this information maybe after 3 days. So what happens is in this scenario, I would want to store this data for a longer term, but the retrieval should be faster here. In the first case, that was not the case. If I needed that data right away, and if I wanted it to be stored for a very short duration, I would use standard. But if I want to store it for a longer duration and I want a quick retrieval, in that case, I would be using infrequent access. And finally, I have Glacier. We have already discussed this. Here, your retrieval speed is low and the data needs to be put in for a longer duration. And that is why it is more affordable. If you take a look at the stats that are there in the image above, you can see that minimum storage duration is nothing for standard. For infrequent, it is 30 days, and for Glacier, it is 90 days. If you take a look at latency, it is milliseconds, and 4 hours. So that itself explains a lot of stuff here. So what are storage classes and what do they do? I believe some idea is clear to you people. Again, as we move into the demo part, we would be discussing this part as well. And we would also discuss expiration and transition that supports these terms. But let us move further and try to understand something else first. Versioning and cross-region replication. Now guys, when I say versioning, I'm actually talking about keeping multiple copies of my data. Now, why do I need versioning and why do I need multiple copies of my data? I've already mentioned that AWS S3 is highly durable and secure. How is that? Because you can fix the errors that are there, and you can also have multiple copies of your data. You can replicate your data. So in case if your data center goes down, a copy of it is mentioned or maintained somewhere else as well. How is this done? By creating multiple versions of your data. Say for example, an image, I store it in my S3 bucket. What happens here is there is key, the name is same, image, and version is some 33333, right? Now take a look at the other image. If I actually go ahead and create a copy of the first image, its name would remain same, but its version would be different. So suppose both of these images, they reside in one bucket. What these images are doing is they are having multiple copies or giving me multiple copies. Now, in case of image, not a lot would change, but if I have doc files or data files, in that case, versioning becomes very important because if I make changes to particular data, if I delete a particular file, a backup should always be there with me. And this is where versioning becomes very, very important. What are the features of versioning? By default, versioning is disabled when you say or when you talk about S3. You have to go ahead and enable this versioning. It prevents overwriting or accidental deletion. We've already discussed that. you get non-concurrent version by specifying version ID as well. What do I mean by this? That means if I actually go ahead and create one more copy of the data and store it, so the latest copy would be available on top. But I can go to the versions option, put in the ID that belong to the previous version, and I can fetch that version as well. So what is cross-region replication? Now, guys, we've discussed versioning. Let us talk about another important topic, that is cross-region replication. Now, when you talk about S3, basically what happens is you create a bucket in a region and you store data in that region. But what if I want to move my data from one region or from one bucket in one region to other bucket in other region? Can we do that? Yes, cross-region replications let you do that. So what you do is you basically go ahead and create a bucket in one region, you create another bucket in another region, and probably you give access to the first bucket to move data from itself to the other bucket. So this was about versioning, this was about cross-region replication, and I believe we've also talked about storage classes. Let me quickly switch into the demo part and discuss these topics to little more detail. So guys, moving back, what we have done is we've actually gone ahead and created a bucket already, right? When you talk about what was the name of the bucket, it was Remos, if I'm not wrong. Yep. So if you click on the bucket name, Remos, what it does is it basically shows you these details, guys. Now you can see that your versioning is disabled, right? So if I click on it, I can actually come to this page and I can say enable versioning. That means a copy of the data that I create is always maintained. So if I go to Remos bucket, or I just move back. Okay, this interface can be a little irritating at times. You have to move back and forth every now and then. So guys, there is a file which we have stored. You can just take a look at this date first. It says that it is 2:35. That was the time when the object was moved. Let me just say that upload the same file. This was the file we uploaded. I say next, 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 upload. So guys, this file is getting uploaded. You can see the name of the file is still same. We have only one file here. Why? Because it was recently modified at 2:45. From 2:25 to 2:35, it got changed to 2:45. So it is fairly clear, guys, what is happening here. Your data is getting modified. And if you wonder as in what happened to the previous version, don't worry. If you click on this show option, you can see that both of your versions are still here, guys. This was created at 2:35 and at 2:45. So this way, data replication and data security works much better. So you can secure your data, you can replicate your data. So in case if you lose your data, you always have the previous versions to deal with. How does the previous version thing works? So guys, what happens is if I delete this file, what Amazon S3 would do is it would set a marker on top of this file. And once I delete it, if I search for that ID won't be available. Why? Because the marker has switched to the next ID now. So whatever I want to do, I can do with the next ID as well. So guys, one more thing that you also need to understand here is what happens to the file. I mean, I've actually deleted a file, but a version is there with me. Can I delete all the versions? Yes, you can specify the ID and you can delete all the versions that you want. You can also do one thing, that is you can set a particular life cycle for your files. When I say life cycle, you can decide as in, okay, now I have a file in standard storage. We've discussed these storages, right? Standard storage, infrequent, and glacier. What you can do with your lifecycle management is you can decide as in, okay, for a particular time duration, I want this file to stay in standard. Maybe after a while, I want to move it to infrequent, and after a while, I want to move it to glacier. Say, for example, there is certain data which was very important for me, but having used that data, I don't want to use it for next few months. So in that case, I can move to the substitutes or to the other storage classes where probably I won't be needing to use that data for a longer while. And doing that, I won't be paying for this data as I used to pay for the standard, because standard is the costliest of the three. So let us quickly see, can we do that, or how does it work at least? If I just go back, this is my file. I can actually just go ahead and switch to management. In that, I have the option of life cycle. If I click here, there is no life cycle. Add a life cycle. You can add a life cycle rule as well, guys. New, let me call it new, and let me say next. It asks me what do I want to do. You can add rules in lifecycle configuration to tell Amazon S3 to transition objects to another storage class. There are pre-request fees. when using lifecycle to transition data to any other S3 or S3 Glacier storage. So which version do I wish to use? Current, I can say yes. Add transition, and I can select transition to this tier when after 30 days. And if I say next, it would agree. Expiration, you can select other policies as well. So guys, when I say transition, first thing what it does is it tells me what time to transition to which storage class. And expiration, it tells me when does this expire. So I can decide when to clean up the objects and when not to. Let's not do that for now. Let's just say next. Next. So guys, what will happen here is after 30 days, my data would move to standard 1A storage. So you can actually go ahead and decide whether you want to move to Glacier. In that dropdown, you had more options as well. I did not show you that, but it is pretty understandable. You can move to Glacier as well. So this is about life cycle, guys. One more thing, you have something called as replication. You can add replication as well if you wish to replicate your data. Cross-region replication. I believe, guys, I do not have access to do that because I'm using someone else's account for now. But let me just give you some idea as to what you can do to replicate your data. You can just go ahead and click on Get Started. So replication, to remind you people, it is nothing but a process of moving your data from bucket in one region to other bucket in some other region. So for that, I need to select a source bucket. So let us just say that this is the bucket that I have. Next. Now guys, in my case, I haven't created the second bucket. What you can do is you can just go ahead and create one more bucket. Once you create the bucket, you can select the destination bucket. For now, let us just say that this is a bucket that has been created by someone else. I'm not going to transfer data here, but let's just select this for the demo sake. This is the bucket that I have. See, it says that bucket does not have versioning enabled. This is very important point, guys. I showed you how to enable versioning, right? If you select the bucket, there is an option on the right side saying versioning. You can actually go ahead and enable versioning there. So once you enable versioning, you would be able to use this bucket. Do you want to change the storage class for the replicated objects? If you say yes, it would give you the option of selecting what storage class do you want to select, right? If you don't, you don't have to. You can say next. You have to enter an IAM role. If you do not have any, you just say create a role and then the rule name. In this case, I do not have any details about this and I don't want to create a role because this account does not belong to me. Sorry for that inconvenience, but you can actually go ahead and select create a role and just say next. And I'm sure that you can actually go ahead and your bucket starts working or your cross-region replication starts working. What happens after that is once you store your object in a particular file, you can actually move that object, not in a particular file, in a particular bucket. You can move that data from that bucket to the other bucket. And a copy of your data is maintained in both the buckets that you use. So this is what cross-region replication is, guys. I believe that we've discussed what are storage classes, we've discussed what is cross-region replication, and we've discussed versioning in general. Let us quickly move back to the presentation and discuss the remaining topics as well. So guys, I've switched into the presentation part. Till time we've discussed how cross-region replication works, we've discussed how versioning works, and we've seen how to carry out that process. The other important topic that we need to focus on is we've known like how to create versions, how to move data from one place to the other. But the thing is, what if I have to move data from a particular location to a location that is very far away from me and still ensure that there is not too much latency in it? Because if you're moving data from one location to a location that is far away from you, it is understandable that it would take a longer while. Why? Because we are moving data from internet. So the amount of data that you move and the further you move, it should take a longer while for that. So how do you solve that problem? You have S3 transfer acceleration. You can do that by using other services as well. We discussed Snowball and Snowmobile as well, but they physically move the data and at times it takes n number of days to move your data. With S3 transfer acceleration, that is not the issue because it moves your data at a very fast pace. So that is a good thing. So how can you move your data at a faster pace? By using S3 transfer acceleration. Now guys, let us first understand what it is exactly. So what it does is it enables fast, easy and secure transfers of files over long distances between your client and S3 bucket. And to do that, it uses a service called as CloudFront and the edge locations it provides you. As I move further, I would be talking about what CloudFront is. Do not worry about it. First, let us take a look at this diagram. So normally if you are moving your data or directly uploading your data to a bucket that is located at a faraway distance, I mean, suppose I'm a customer and I wish to put my data into an S3 bucket, which is located maybe a continent away from me. So using internet, it might take a longer while. Instead, what I can do is I can use transfer acceleration. So how is it different? Now guys, there is a service called as AWS CloudFront. What it does is it basically lets you cache your data. When I say cache your data, that means you can store your data at a location that is in the interim or that is close to your destination. Now, this service is basically used to ensure that data retrieval is fast. Suppose I'm searching for a particular URL. What happens is when I type that URL, a request is sent to the server, it fetches the data and sends it to me. So if it is located at a very far location, it might take long while for me to fetch the data. So what people do is they analyze as in how much requests are coming from a particular location. And if there are frequent and a lot of requests, what they do is they set up an edge location close to that particular region. So you can put your data, you can cache your data on that edge location, and that data can be fetched from that edge location at a faster rate. So this is how edge locations work. What transfer acceleration does is it basically puts in your data at the edge location so that it can be moved to your S3 bucket at a quicker pace. And that is why it is fast. So guys, this was about S3 data acceleration. Let us quickly move into the console part and try to understand how S3 acceleration works. So guys, I've switched into the console. S3 acceleration or data transfer acceleration is a very easy thing to do. I do not remember the bucket name. I think it was Remos something. Okay, if I select this and open it, I can actually go to the properties part. Guys, there are other things that you might want to consider. You can come here and take a look at those as well. For now, I'm just gonna say go ahead and enable transfer acceleration. It is suspended. I can enable it. It gives me the endpoint as well, and I say save. So guys, what this means is if I'm putting my data into this bucket, it would be transferred very quickly, or I can use this bucket to transfer my data at a quicker pace by using data transfer acceleration by S3. Again, guys, I missed out on one important point. The fact that we have been talking about buckets and stuff like that, there is something important that I would like to show to you people. First, let us just go back and disable this part. I do not want it to have the transfer acceleration thing going. I just wanted to show it to you people how it is done. I just say go back to suspended. And one more thing, guys, if you once you actually enable the transfer part and if you upload a file, you can see the difference in the speed. The problem is you need a third-party tool to do that. So you can actually go ahead and download a third-party tool as well. And using that, you can actually go ahead and see how it works. Having said that, I was talking about buckets in general. So let us just go back and go to Remos again. There you go. And I'm gonna copy the ARN. I'll tell you why. I've copied the ARN. Now, when I open this bucket, guys, we have quite a few things. Permissions, I talked about security, right? So you can decide public access as in who gets to access your bucket. So guys, you can actually go ahead and decide who gets to access what kind of buckets. Say for example, here in your block public access, you can decide who gets to access what data publicly. For that, you have access control lists. Using these ACLs, you can actually decide who gets to access how. Other thing you can do is you can just go ahead and create a bucket policy and decide who gets to access your bucket or who gets to put your data, delete your data, and do all these things. Let us just go ahead and create a policy. Now you can write your own policy or you can just use a policy generator, which again is a third-party tool. So I want to create a bucket policy for my S3. So let's just say S3 bucket policy. And what kind of effect I want? I mean, do I want someone to access my system or do I want to deny someone from accessing my system? I can decide that. So let's for now just say that I want to deny someone from doing something. And what I want that someone to do is to deny a particular thing for that person for all the objects. I mean, I do not want that person to access any of the objects that is there. So what I say is star. That means nobody should able to do anything to any of the objects that are there in this bucket. So it says star service Amazon S3. What action I want? I want to prevent someone from deleting an object. There you go. And this is the ARN. That is why I copied it. It should be followed by a / and a star. Add a statement. And I say generate policy. So guys, the policy has been generated. I just have to copy it. If I copy this thing and I go back to the console, if I paste it here, I can say save. It's saved. I'll save it again just to be safe. So guys, we have actually gone ahead and let me just go ahead and again go to Remos. So guys, now there is an object here. Let me just try and delete this object. If I just go to the actions part here and I say delete, see the file is still here. Is it the other version? No, it's not deleted. See, there's an error here. If I click on it, it says 100% failed. Why? Access denied, because I do not have the access to delete the object right now. Why? Because I've created a bucket policy, guys. So that is what bucket policies and ACLs do. They let you make your objects or your data more secure. And as you saw in the option, there are quite a few options that you have at your disposal, which you can choose from, which you can mix and match and decide as in, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to probably give someone an access to delete a bucket. I want to give someone an access to do this or do that. So guys, this was about S3 data transfer acceleration, and we've also seen how you create a bucket policy, how you attach it to your bucket and stuff like that. Now let me just go back and kind of brush up this session or finish this session up with a use case so that you can probably understand the topics that we've discussed a little more. First, let us go back to the use case, guys. So guys, I've switched into my presentation console again, and we would be discussing IMDb media. Now, for people who watch movies, they might know what IMDb is. It is a website that gives you details about movies. They tell you what are the movies that are nice. If you probably select or type a particular movie name, they would give you details about it, as in who were the actors, how was the movie, how was the review, a short snippet explaining you what the movie is about, its genre and stuff like that. Plus they have their own ratings to kind of gauge in the customers even better, as in IMDb being a popular site, and when they say that this movie is this person good or liked by these many people, people normally believe it. So they have that score as well. So if you talk about a website that basically deals with movies, you understand the number of movies that are released worldwide. And if most of them are present here on IMDb, that means that database is huge. But we are talking about data that is being processed in great numbers, great amounts. I mean, when you talk about the data that is here, what is happening here is you have n number of movies that are being released. So if someone searches for a particular movie, it has to go through the database and that data has to be fetched to him right away. So how do you deal with the latency issue? Well, this would answer a lot of questions, or it would sum up a lot of topics that we've discussed here. Let us go through this use case probably. So what happens here is, in order to get the lowest possible latency, all the possible results for a search are pre-calculated with a document for every combination of letters in the search. What this means is, probably based on the letters, you have a document that is created, and it is traversed in such an order that all the data is scanned letter-wise. When you actually go ahead and put forth a query, what happens is, suppose if there is a 20-character letter or a word that you put in, so there are somewhere around 23 into 1030 combinations that are possible. So your computer has to go through these many combinations. What S3 does is, it basically lets you store the data that IMDb has. And once IMDb has stored that data, they use CloudFront again. We have discussed what CloudFront is. They use CloudFront to store this data to the nearest possible location, so that when a user fetches this data, it is fetched from that location. So what happens is, basically, when these many possibilities or combinations are to be dealt with, it becomes complicated. But in practice, what IMDb does is, it basically uses analytics in such a way that these combinations become lesser. So in order to search for a 20-character letter, they basically have to go through 150000 documents. And because of S3 and CloudFront, you basically can distribute all the data to different edge locations and to buckets within hours. And since we are talking about huge amount of data, it is more than terabytes. It is like hundreds, thousands of terabytes of data. So we can understand how much data are we talking about. And S3 actually features or serves a number of such use cases or requirements. So guys, I believe by now you've understood what S3 is. Let me give you a quick sum up or a quick walkthrough as to what we've studied, because we've talked about a lot of topics, guys. First, we started with the basics of different storage services. We've understood storage services like EFS, EBS, storage gateway. We've talked about Glacier, we've talked about Snowmobile, Snowball, and then we moved to S3. S3, we talked about buckets, we talked about objects, We talked about versioning. We understood why versioning is needed so that we can basically replicate our data, prevent it from deletion, prevent it from corruption. We also talked about a cross-region replication where you can move data from one region to the other. We talked about how we can move data faster by using S3 data transfer acceleration. And then we also took a look at basics like what are the storage classes, what are the bucket policies, how to create bucket policies. And we also discussed an important topic called as transition and expiration, where if your data expires, it is deleted. If your data needs to be transferred to different stages, you can do that as well. So all these topics were discussed, and we also discussed some important features. And finally, we finished this session up with a use case. So guys, this has been a long session. I believe that you all had something nice, something new to learn out of it. And I hope you stay tuned to Edureka for such nice new videos. So guys, have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.